Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a grayish, blustery day here at Blue Heron Lake, Thursday, July 17th, 2025. I cannot believe I have survived this long. I never thought. I think this is very common both to people of my generations and those born after us. To just not believe that we could possibly live, given the catastrophic uncertainty and negative ambiguity of modernity, which is at the same time for many of us staggeringly peaceful. The world is infinitely stranger and more diverse than anything we can possibly imagine, as if this planet, I've spoken of this before, were all of the worlds and all of the times of all of the worlds, right here, now. People don't tend to think this way. They tend to think from separation into networks, into systems, and they never really get to unity. Right? I was trained specifically to do the other thing during my first and second encounters with a non-human intelligence, that I refuse to pigeonhole as it's a this or a that. However, it would bear strong resemblances to stories of the Logos, a colloquium of non-physical intelligences that can express as a single mind or being. Even the common words we have like mind or being are not applicable here. This is a superposition above all minds in so much as I was able to understand all that I was shown directly and often experienced directly, because during this experience the being that was teaching and training me and carrying me through registers of ability to interact with it gave me direct experiences. This is not like being told a story. This is like being present at a historical event, not by proxy, but by virtue of the ostensible fact that the being that is sharing its experience with you was transpresent, meaning present in each of the minds of the beings and the places, the animals, the plants, the insects, the humans, at some historical event, and thus has direct experience of it, except that for this being there's no such thing as as historical or futurial. All events, all minds, are accessible instantaneously, and all possible groupings of or subsets or supersets of them are accessible as its own mind in the now. Right? This implies that I mean, it actually, for me, it doesn't imply anything. I had direct experience of this for many months. There's no implications. As far as I'm concerned, it's meta-factual that all minds are one mind. And their apparent distinction is both an illusion. It's not exactly an illusion. It's as if certain features of our situation, by being occluded, blocked to our common awareness, present a picture of existence and relationship and identity that is inherently false. It's not... Maybe I should rephrase that. It's not false because it's a lie. It's false because it's partial, both in the sense of being unjustifiably biased, and in the sense of not including what actually matters and what would liberate our souls, our minds, our lives, our world. This morning, in reading Ian McGilchrist's The Matter with Things, I've reached the second volume. So I'm about 1,000 pages in, approximately, or actually closer to 800. I was wildly unsurprised, but very pleased to hear in chapter 1 a description of an Iroquois cosmology with two beings that essentially, one of them is called something like grasps the sky with both hands in translation, and I can actually not remember the other one, its proper name, but it was effectively it was like arrowhead or hatchet. And these are things I was directly shown. Right? They relate to hemispheric lateralization, but we should understand that hemispheric lateralization is and can only be an embodied exemplar of fundamental aspects of that which generates organisms, which is, it depends on how you want to think about it, at what register. You could say that it's the world, right? Or you could say it's the sun and the moon and the world. Or you could say it's interstellar space, the sun and the moon and the world. Or you could say it's the galaxy, the sun and the moon, right? Time, space, the sun and the moon and the world. And other beings, of course. But there are fundamental, primordial features of what I usually call origin. And by this I don't mean mechanical processes, though mechanical processes, this perspective on mechanical processes is precisely the perspective of the brother called hatchet. It is a thing that cuts, right? And it is the origin in our people of most of our problems. It is occlusive, it is selfish, it is arrogant, it is hubristic. These are not its only features, and there are, it's not merely bad, right, or evil, though its activities are probably the origin of what we call evil. And there are ways of working with this aspect of ourselves and the universe that tone down its warlike, self-aggrandizing, selfish natures. And particularly when it's serving, even in my own mind, right? I have this feature, this array of features. And when it's serving something beautiful, it is at peace. It is happy. The problem is related to the strange trope that the devil finds use for idle hands. This trope could be reimagined as something like, without a noble purpose, I descend into murder, right? For this aspect. Now I'm trying to remember the origin of the very exciting, extremely short phrase that I'm going to explore here today. The simple phrase, "It eats possibility." This came up in a discussion with someone close to me last night, and my mind was thoroughly blown because it's the most concise articulation of a feature of our situation as human beings and as living beings and organisms and so forth, that is, to me, the most terrifying and the most troubling, though all of these situations can be traced to relatively simple root causal aspects of the nature of that which is, and particularly the nature of things on Earth, because Earth is at once all the worlds and also very special, unique, and troubled at the moment princess, if we think of her as feminine, which I most often do. So one of my recent insights that I find very provocative and thrilling is that organisms and living beings and human beings have one can clearly discern two or three fundamental pivots of the purposive spirit of existence itself, and our existence particularly. I think the first one is easily overlooked because we kind of go like, yeah, of course, so what? If we hear this word communion. But it is the reunification in the physical layer, which is distant from origin, the spirit of truth, intelligence, and so forth, in various ways. The reunification of beings who are originally the same one and are also incarnating distinctly. And so it's love. It's the recognition and celebration and development of unity within distinction. And this is crucially fundamental to all beings. If this is not obvious, watch beings mating. Or observe long-lost children reunited with their parents, or grandparents seeing their grandchildren for the first time, or what happens when people get together for a meal, or play at sports or music, or are doing good science, or any of these things, right? You will see the power of unity, of reunification, of communion, relational intimacy. And the depth of that is inconceivable. It's infinitely deep. There's nothing trivial about this. Though it's easy to write it off because we're like, yeah, of course, love. Okay, next. That's a catastrophic mistake. It's most of what matters. And if you threaten someone or a being that someone loves, you will see them drop all the fictional bullshit that they have ever imagined or bought or tried to, hoard, right? They will give up all of that right now to save the being they love. No thought. Instantaneous transformation. All costumes come off. So this is one of the first pivots. The second is that it has become clear to me, and if you watch human beings doing things they love, you'll see infinite examples of this. We import impossibility through the registers of the dandelion to the possible, the probable, the actual, and so forth. And we become the importing of impossibility. This is part of what I'm doing right now. By speaking of these matters, I am importing impossibility. I am also expressing my love for all beings, for origin, and particularly for this world and this Son whom I adore unequivocally. Beyond all things that I have ever adored. Far beyond my attachment to any object or situation. So I think we're importing impossibility into the physical layer and expressing it. If this isn't obvious, just look at even the strangely mechanical branches of science or technology, and you will see this over and over again. The impossible is suddenly now possible, again and again and again. Look in figure skating or sports. Look in creativity, painting, music, dance, acting, improvisation, the composition of literature or music or art. Right? Fundamentally, this thing is going on. We are importing the impossible, becoming it, expressing it. This is the nature of nature. And I mention this because I'm going to get back to that statement I made earlier. And the third thing, and these things have only recently become, the love part, the communion part, is I've been aware of for a long time. But these other two are relatively new to my awareness. They've occurred to me only really clearly. I've always been aware of them, like many things. Insight is like this. You've been aware of and sort of, chewing on something your entire life, and then finally, I can articulate this. So I think the other very surprising but obvious thing that organisms are doing is they are proofreading the physical layer. Right? This is what predation is actually about. It's not competition. It's the preservation of both the possibility space of organisms, and how do you preserve that? Well, you turn the organisms that are disoriented, misoriented, sick, dying, badly injured, and so forth into food. Right? You eat them. Something has to consume and reprocess beings who have become so catastrophically disoriented that they are a threat to all other beings. There's really only one kind of being around here that is like that. It's our kind, humans. And we're well overdue for, unfortunately, a very severe culling. But there's something else that does this here, and it's a product of the humans, and it's the primary causal feature of suffering and devastation and extinction and murder and torture and slaughter on Earth. And this is machines. Because what machines actually do in the environment is they obliterate the possibility space of organismal and human intellectual and relational development. They eat the possibility, and they turn out, convenience or other devices or dead commodity objects or billions of packets of ketchup or whatever it is they're doing. You can see this feature everywhere in modern human history, particularly in the processes that give rise to the military-industrial prison complex, our governments, which are essentially like machines. They eat the possibility space. And you can conscript humans to become like machines and just destroy the possibility space, as we are seeing now in the actions of the fictional construct, which is a real thing called Israel, and their genocide in Gaza, for which there can be no possible excuse. We've seen this many times before in history, if we lived long enough or have read. So, there's a way to get the wrong kind of impossibility, right? To import the wrong kind. The kind that results in large language models that require, 500,000 gallons of water per day. I heard that Meta was building a single data center the size of Manhattan. The water, right? Fracking. The devastation of the oceans. This is the fingerprint of doom in the form of machines. They obliterate the historical and futurial possibility space of ecologies, intelligence, actual developmental efflorescence, progress, and so forth, replaced with a kind of a device that just cycles electrons and forces through channels to produce other objects, whether those objects are linguistic or physical. The whole AI debacle deserves an entire recording. Unfortunately, it's so thorny. I have tons of notes, hundreds of pages of notes, but condensing them into easily deliverable content is challenging, to put it mildly. So these three principles, communion, importing impossibility into the physical layer, becoming its expression, thus transforming the possibility space positively for all beings in the physical layer, not just locally, thus sustaining that possibility space, nurturing it, expanding it, and then, devastating it with war and machines. Again, there's no excuse for this at all, especially not in our time. It's ridiculous nonsense of conserved idiocy, lethally, deadly, omnicidal idiocy, right? It just gets conserved generation to generation because the humans have been engaging in structured fictional roles that demand its continuity, their continuity, and essentially the demons they must serve. So the consumption of the possibility space by static, formalized processes, and then what a devastating thing it is to become aware of these matters. Right? Who could possibly carry this weight? A single human being is endowed. We can import the impossibility of the sudden transformation of our species And there are some of us who spend our lives working at that hopeful task. And then, of course, so then the third thing, right, the proofreading, yeah, which is what predators do in the environment, right? They primarily capture disoriented. Well, this is not entirely true. One feature of their broad effect, beings who eat other beings, right, which is almost all beings around here, they're proofreading the physical layer in an effort to maintain and expand and nurture and fertilize the possibility space for future generations, except the humans. The humans are engaged in an entirely different game, one that ends badly for everything that lives on this world every day, every minute, every second. So these three pivots are on my mind today. And I'm excited, even though it's a very dire thing, to simply be able to say that human technologies obliterate the possibility space, historically and futurially, for organismal health, development, efflorescence, and the primary purposive features of organisms, communion, importing impossibility, and proofreading in the physical layer. So with that, I'll take a brief break, sit some Zen, and rejoin you in a little bit. If you look deeply into what we have come to understand about biology, of course, this is a kind of a meaningless phrase, because who do I mean by we, and what am I talking about? Everything, something. But, observe the organisms, and particularly the microorganism, what we've learned about cells and the immune system from the relatively mechanical purposive and procedural activities of most scientists. And you will see all three of these features. You'll see communion, right? 50 trillion cells, probably 8 orders of magnitude of that of viruses walking around as a human being. Why is it that there are distinct elements to organisms? Why not just make them one transcendental substance? Well, there are beings like that. And the substances that comprise the seeming parts are transcendental. But what you will see are all three features. Communion, importing impossibility into the physical, possibilizing it, sustaining the possibility space of life, intelligence, being, development, which we can think of in various ways. For evolutionary biologists, this word adaptation is used, but I think it's a misnomer, because they're ignoring so many crucial aspects of what is at play. And then proofreading, the genome. Your immune system, how it relates with what we call disease, which is actually part of the process of proofreading. So this triangle has become prominent in my awareness, but I want to highlight specifically the ways that the human fascination with objects, devices, machines, commodities, condiments is obliterating that possibility space and turning it into dead, structured terrain. And in our time, this is a threat to everything in time-space, not merely here on Earth. We tend to suppose that the Earth is a separate little backwater. It's not true. Each of the places in time-space is a condensation of the entirety, an exemplar of all beings in all of time, and their possibility space, and the epic adventure of importing impossibility into the physical layer and sustaining it against all odds. One could suggest meaningfully that this is what the sun is about, that this is what the earth is for, is doing, is up to. In the same way, in a very similar way, a lesser exemplar, but an important metaphor, that a human woman's womb does this. Yeah? And it also proofreads, right, what is going on in the actual situation where the fertilization of an ovum occurs, right? How many millions of sperm, or a myriad of sperm, disembark from the male vehicle into the female vehicle, and have an incredible adventure inside her that results, in at least some cases, in a human child, or any mammalian progeny. Or indeed, the same thing is going on in all the aspects of nature, right? So, as should be obvious, the sperm are not competing, though there's a feature of that idea that might be relevant. What they are actually doing is what all organisms do, and even the humans do a version of, toxic and stupidifyingly procedural though it is. They're promoting from among their number the best contenders for fertilization and the inception of a new physical being in time-space. I mean, this is profound beyond my capacity to express, though I'm using it as an example or an exemplar of the fundamental beauty, heroism, adoration, joy, play, experiment that becomes living beings. One of whom I am interacting with at the moment, a raven friend. It's not hard to be friends with somebody who brings you wonderful treats. There's a little towhee here as well that would like in on this arrangement. I should be able to make that happen somehow. Let's see here. But I've got to keep the raven busy or it'll scare the towhee off. Right? Because the raven is very large. And what is a peanut for the raven, a tiny scrap of a peanut is for the towhee. The raven does seem willing to share a little bit. You know, this little moment here, seemingly simple. I have peanuts. The birds like protein. It is a moment of communion, but all of the features are at play, right? Proofreading. There are predators here. All these birds know that. Hawks live here. They don't have a lot of predators, but there are some. And, oh, another little towhee has come, and there's also now a Stellar's jay. These towhees are a couple. The male is much more adventurous, as is common in avians. So I find these insights astonishing. I often come up over time with what I think of as triangles in a way, a related sense of three principles, right? And I'm trying to understand. I'm not, some people think I'm arrogant or full of hubris, self-aggrandizing or whatever. And I might have moments of that as a human being. I think we all do. In fact, calling out someone for this is a peculiar form of arrogance. I can see where your failings are. Okay, great. How about help me overcome them? Hey, good to see you. Rather than just, for example, hurt me. I have features of this, but mostly what I'm interested in is insight. I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to do the three things, right? And I also have been thinking a lot more about the other triangle that's been relevant for me for some time now, since I discovered it, the ambiguity, vigilance, prediction problem. So this triangle, just to be clear, is communion, impossibility, proofreading. Yeah? If you think this isn't going on, hello, I'd love to hear more from you about that, because you're doing it right now. We're doing this together right now. You listening and me speaking in a recording is a mode of communion. We're importing impossibility by actually talking about features so primordial to the existence of beings themselves, let alone organisms, in a way that probably no one has ever spoken of directly before. Though I think it would be, one of the problems of being human. I certainly experienced this problem very trenchantly myself, is that we can mistake the limitations of our own experience or access to other minds and beings, or we can mistake the rather poor quality of many of our modern human experiences as indicative of what the world is or what humans are, and it's just not that way. My own relative isolation has a profound effect on my motivations and what I'm inclined to notice or ignore, how I see, why I see, what I make of what I encounter or attend with my awareness. I remember a close friend of mine who thankfully is doing very well now, at one point was seriously, very seriously, obsessed with ending her life. And I tried to get her to see that she had such a modest experience of what it means to be alive, or a young woman, or a being, or a mind, that at the very least she should pause and explore beyond her familiar terrain. We both got lucky. She managed to survive, all credit to her, the few years of her agonizing despair, and by no means leads a perfect life now, but enjoys a much broader and much richer relational and experiential and play space than what was going on in the rather devastated little backwater of Indiana, where she was essentially being tormented. So we can easily mistake, this is an important feature of cognitive activism, right? Do not take one's limited experience of the world or intelligence or creativity or play as indicative of what's actually going on. But I too am subject to these things, right? I am, as much as I am a very unusually minded and sensitive person who loves very easily and enthusiastically, I'm also a fairly isolated person. Somebody was messaging me the other night, and they said, like, what's going on, you know? And I said, I like to joke, but often my jokes are not merely humor. I said, oh, I'm having a blast, isolation level, presently, escape pod with no radio in deep space. It's tragic. I think it's very unlike this in most other places, but in the United States, isolation is part of the systemic toxicity of modernity, and it's viciously cruel to humans to have to live this way. We are naturally communal pod animals that desperately need to be with and for other beings, to be loved, to be seen, to be known, to be inspired, to be reassured, to develop together, to grow and learn together. Which brings me to another feature. I keep hearing in another thing that's been on my mind anyway. I keep hearing in podcasts that I listen to about the UFO UAP phenomena and why it's been kept a secret. I keep hearing this phrase. I'm sure those of you who've been following this are familiar with it. This phrase, ontological shock. We can't tell the humans. It'll destroy their ontologies. Okay, so first of all, their ontologies are complete bullshit. They're like just made up nonsense down to the nth degree. So that's the first problem. And the second problem is oh, People feeding the animals. I can't really criticize them unless they're feeding them bread. Hopefully they're not doing that. Oh, it looks like peanuts. So I want to be really clear about something. The whole endeavor of learning is to destroy your ontology, right? Like, actual intelligence works this way. It formulates a structured map, and then it dissolves that map and keeps some of the jewels that are actually, important or orienting, and then re-resolves a better map, and then dissolves. This is what a good mind does. So this ontological shock thing, it just means like you don't want to learn. You don't want to see better. You want to worship the shibboleths of your priors, right? Fail to update them as effusively, aggressively, and enthusiastically as possible, which you see all over the branches on the tree of knowledge, especially the dead kind that humans are wont to cleave to. So, what is the opposite of ontological shock? Well, there's two opposites. The first is to just try to eat the gravestones of what you've previously established. See how that goes. Your teeth are going to be wildly unhappy about this, as will the rest of you. In fact, your ancestors will be ashamed. And so yeah, what is the opposite of ontological shock? Resting in a false ontology? Is there anyone who really wants to do that? If you came up and just offered people like, I'll give you a better ontology, a better way of forging ontologies than what you've been up to ever, if they really understand, are they going to say no? Well, depends on which aspect you're talking to, right? Are you talking to both hands in the deep sky, or are you talking to Hatchet? Right? Which one has risen to primacy in consciousness, awareness, thought, consideration, concern, motivation, and so forth? And yeah, of course, we like to reduce vigilance because it's very expensive. But positive vigilance, positive ambiguity, and the opportunity sentinel are absolutely primordially crucial to being a being at all, and to existing with any, more than trivial degree of what we think of as fulfillment. Right? So, yeah, what is the opposite of ontological shock? Stupidity? Right? Just like trudgery through the graveyards of ignorance that have been, have become statues in the library of this is what is actually going on. I mean, it's really bizarre. Did people die of insanity when, it was suggested that long before Galileo, right, that the Earth was maybe orbiting the sun? Was this just ruinous to the possibilities of human mental coherence, right? Or that, did it obliterate, did people die of agonic insanity when scientists proposed, contrary to lots of the prevailing backwaters of dogma, that corvids could solve problems that required procedural intelligence? Ravens and crows and blue jays, did people just blow their brains out? Like, I can't live anymore if birds are intelligible. So if you find out that the universe is not an arbitrary machine, is that going to wreck you? that there are non-physical intelligences, which should be blatantly obvious to everyone and was to our ancestors throughout history. Did it ruin them? Did it just destroy their desire to live or be or grow? No, it had none of that effect. What ruins us is ontological poison, which is most of what we've got as moderns, right? This is what is being spoon-fed to us from cradle to grave in media and most science writing and much of medicine and all of politics and all this shit. Right? So for me, your mileage may vary. I'd rather flush the toilet. Like, I don't like to worship.
At least, I don't know if it was Eagle Creek, but
I don't like to worship what comes out of my ass and enthrone it and put it on a shelf and write books about it. Although, if we were actually going to pay true attention to shit, we'd learn everything, because it's probably one of the most important things. But the kind of shit that I mean isn't the kind that comes out of my ass, right? It's the kind that is made and promoted and hammered home as ontological validity among the moderns. So yeah, this is a bunch of bullshit, right? This is just lying. You can create humans who are so resistant to insight or intelligence or learning that any evidence of any of these is seen as a threat to their, superiority? I don't know. It's a very strange mode of superiority. It looks to me like someone who, analogously has their legs removed in order to assert the validity of their living room. Right? And then goes about attacking anyone who's still walking around. And there is a feature in our lineage form, right? There's a feature of our minds. It's not, quote, the left hemisphere, unquote. It's certain aspects of the left hemisphere-like way of being in the world that are the exemplars of the hatchet being in the Iroquois cosmology. And the Iroquois cosmology is not alone in this by a long shot. In the Navajo Blessing Way literature, which I'm lucky enough to have an amazing book about, the earth, it's not entirely clear what they mean, but one could think of it as the earth has two inner forms, Old Salt Woman and Changing Woman. And these are sort of like the core and the surface of the earth, but also not so much the earth, right? Our home, our living place, this way of being alive here. And in the Blessing Way story, it's very complex, and so I'm going to just focus on one feature of it, and forgive me for what I may get wrong here. But Changing Woman, she has relations with the sun, and a child is born called Slayer of Alien Gods in translation. And this is because there are too many monsters. There are these monsters everywhere, and they're eating up all the food. By the way, does that remind you much of our current situation as moderns? I'm passing car after car after car after car. There's a bunch of monsters, and they're eating up all of the food. Yeah? The food of possibility for organisms. They're ruining that. So yeah, there were too many monsters, and so Slayer was born because they had to really struggle to get any food. And there were two guardians at the Hogan of Old Salt Woman and Changing Woman that were Bear Man and Rattlesnake Man. And then she had another child, and it was supposed to be kind of a secret. Like, she told both the children that their father was far away and stuff. But she had another child after Slayer of Alien Gods. I believe that one came first, but I'm not sure. I may have this wrong. It may be that Little Water of the Moon came first and Slayer came second. And Slayer was born with thunder and storms and frightening intensity. And Little Water of the Moon just slipped out of her womb gently, and peacefulness prevailed. And unlike many cosmologies where these two are at odds with each other, which is certainly how it is in our situation now, Water of the Moon is nearly dead and Slayer is killing everything it can, including our minds. But in the Navajo story, these two brothers collaborate and they don't fight. They take care of each other and they go on amazing adventures to try to find their dad. And they slay some monsters that are really bad and are impossible to harm, right, or invulnerable. And Little Water of the Moon provides the intelligence and the insight, and Slayer does the cutting. Also in the Ojibwe creation story, there are two brothers like this, right? So this is it's not like these people told each other their stories and then, just invented glosses on them. Though this has happened, and I suspect the story of Cain and Abel in Genesis is this kind of a thing, where it's a vignette that was adopted from other stories. Though this is a primordial trope in ancient human cosmologies. Not accidentally, right? The physical layer carries with it its nature is to present the occlusion of origin as if it were a being. Right? The bad man, the monster. This is a bit confusing because the occlusion is natural and good by itself. It's when it is unencompassed by the spirits and intelligence of organism and origin, communion, importing the impossible, proofreading. Right? When all of these are absent, then the thing becomes a demon. And to the degree they are absent, the more horrific the misbehavior of these aspects of being become. These are some of my thoughts for today. I'm profoundly grateful to all of you who follow my work. Hopefully you get something amazing from doing so. I'd love to hear from you with questions or comments. Tickle the algorithm, please. My follower count is quite minimal. Perhaps justifiably. Perhaps it's more complex than that. So yeah, take a moment to like or share, comment or question, or criticize me, whatever feels right. And if you want, you can leave a one-time donation, buy me a coffee, support me on Patreon with my 3 other supporters at present, to whom I'm profoundly grateful. Your attention and support is crucial to continuing my creative and activist endeavors. May insight come to live in your heart and mind, and the hearts and minds of those you love, of our people and our world, as it once did long ago. May you be lucky and brilliant. May your dreams be sweet and rich and healing. I hope for the fulfillment of the promise implicit in our human incarnation together here at this time on this beautiful world that I love. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.